My name is Reed. I am 63 years old, and I spent most of my life building things with my hands before I built a business with my heart. All I ever wanted was to provide for my family and give my son Aaron opportunities I never had. I never thought the business I built with my own hands would be taken from me by my own flesh and blood. Before I tell you how my own son stabbed me in the back and what I did about it, let me know where you are watching from and hit that like button if you have ever been betrayed by someone you loved. I grew up in Detroit, the son of a factory worker who spent 30 years on the assembly line. My father worked 60-hour weeks, his hands permanently stained with grease and his back perpetually sore. Still, he never complained. He just got up each morning at 4:30, packed his lunch in a metal box, and headed to the plant. That was my first lesson in what it meant to be a man. You take care of your family, no matter the cost. By 16, I was working 2 jobs after school. One at a gas station pumping fuel, and another stocking shelves at the local grocery. Every dollar I earned went to helping my parents with bills. College was never in the cards for me. When my friends were heading off to universities, I was taking on more hours and eventually landing an apprenticeship with a local construction company. It was not glamorous work. I spent years hauling materials, digging foundations in the bitter Michigan winter, and learning every aspect of building from the ground up. But I was good at it. I had my father's work ethic and a natural knack for seeing how things fit together. I was 23 when I met Sarah. She came to the job site where we were building a new public library. She was a librarian checking on the progress, and she caught me eating my lunch alone. Unlike most people who saw just another dirty construction worker, Sarah saw me. She asked about the book I was reading. It was a dog-eared copy of The Old Man and the Sea. My father had given it to me before he passed. Sarah and I married 11 months later. We did not have much, but we had each other. We rented a small apartment on the east side of town, saved every penny we could, and dreamed about our future. Sarah continued working at the library, while I moved up from apprentice to journeyman, then to crew leader. For 3 years, we were deliriously happy in our simple life. When Sarah told me she was pregnant, I felt terror and joy in equal measure. How could I provide for a child when we were barely making ends meet? But Sarah had a way of calming my fears. She would hold my rough hands in her soft ones and tell me that love was the most important thing we could give a child. Everything else would work itself out. The pregnancy was difficult from the start. Sarah was sick constantly, and the doctors kept finding complications. She had to stop working in her second trimester, which put all the financial pressure on me. I picked up every overtime shift I could, sometimes working 18-hour days, coming home just to shower and head back to the site. Aaron was born on a Tuesday in April. 7 pounds, 4 ounces of perfection. When the nurse placed him in my arms, I made a silent promise that this boy would have every opportunity I never had. He would not have to choose between education and survival. He would not have calloused hands at 16. He would have choices. For 5 years, we were a complete family. Sarah was a natural mother, patient and loving. I worked hard during the day and came home to read stories to Aaron at night. We did not have much, but we had everything that mattered. Then Sarah started getting headaches. At first, we thought it was just stress or lack of sleep. New parents rarely get enough rest. But when she started forgetting things and losing her balance, we knew something was wrong. The diagnosis was a brain tumor. Aggressive. Inoperable. The doctors gave her 6 months. She lasted 4. Suddenly, I was a 32-year-old widower with a 5-year-old son who kept asking when Mommy was coming home. I did not have time to grieve properly. Aaron needed me and the bills kept coming. The medical expenses from Sarah's illness had drained our modest savings. I had to keep working. My foreman was understanding, but there is only so much flexibility in construction. Work starts at dawn, and children need to be at school by 8:30. I cobbled together a network of neighbors and Sarah's former colleagues who would help with Aaron. Some days I would drop him off with Mrs. Patterson next door at 5 in the morning, still in his pajamas. She would feed him breakfast and get him to school. The guilt was crushing. I was missing his childhood while trying to provide for it. When I could, I would take him to the job sites on weekends. He was fascinated by the big machines and the way buildings came together. Even at 6, he would ask surprisingly insightful questions about why we built things a certain way. As Aaron grew older, it became clear he had inherited my work ethic, but his mother's intelligence. Where I had been average in school, he excelled. His teachers told me he had a gift for mathematics and problem solving. By middle school, he was talking about business models and investment strategies that went completely over my head. I knew he was destined for more than swinging a hammer. When his guidance counselor suggested he apply for a scholarship to a prestigious prep school across town, I was both proud and terrified. The scholarship would cover tuition, but there were still books, uniforms, extracurriculars, and a social life among wealthy kids. I took a second job doing security at night. 3 nights a week, I would finish at the construction site at 5, grab dinner with Aaron, help him with homework, and then head to my security job from 10 p.m. until 6 a.m. I would sneak in 2 hours of sleep before heading back to the site. It was grueling, but seeing Aaron thrive made it worthwhile. By his senior year, Aaron was class president and had offers from several top business schools. The day his acceptance letter from Wharton arrived, I cried for the first time since Sarah died. She would have been so proud of him. I certainly was. The scholarships covered most of his college expenses, but not all. I refinanced our small house, picked up even more overtime, and postponed the knee surgery my doctor had been recommending for years. Nothing was more important than Aaron's future. While other men my age were planning for retirement, I was planning how to afford 4 more years of supporting my son's education. There were no vacations, no new truck when the old one started to fail, no dating, though a few kind women at church had tried to set me up over the years. My life was work and Aaron. That was enough for me. I missed his graduation ceremony because of a construction accident that put me in the hospital for 3 days. A support beam had shifted unexpectedly, and I had pushed a younger worker out of the way. The doctor said it was a miracle nothing was broken, but the bruised ribs made it impossible to travel. Aaron understood. He always understood the sacrifices. Or so I thought. When Aaron returned home after business school, he was different. More confident, more polished. He had internships with tech companies and investment firms under his belt. He spoke a language of startups, venture capital, and scaling that seemed like a foreign tongue to me. But beneath the new vocabulary and expensive haircut, he was still my boy. He still laughed at my bad jokes, and still wanted my meatloaf for dinner, a recipe I had perfected during his childhood when cooking became my responsibility. One night over dinner, Aaron started talking about a software idea he had been developing. He explained how construction companies were still using outdated methods for project management, inventory tracking, and scheduling. With the right software, he claimed a company could save millions in wasted materials and man-hours. I was skeptical. In my world, construction was about experience and relationships, not computers. You cannot replace 30 years of knowledge with some program, I told him. Aaron smiled that confident smile they must teach in business school. I am not trying to replace the knowledge, Dad. I am trying to augment it. What if we combined your 30 years of industry expertise with technology that makes that expertise scalable? It was the first time he had said we, I asked what he meant. I want us to start a company together, he said. Construct Edge, software built by actual construction experts for construction experts. You know all the problems that need solving because you have lived them. I know how to build the solutions because that is what I studied. Together, we would be unstoppable. The idea terrified and thrilled me in equal measure. I had never been an entrepreneur. I had been a worker my entire life. But the passion in Aaron's eyes reminded me of Sarah, and I found myself nodding along as he outlined his vision. I would need startup capital, Aaron explained. About $200,000 to build the minimum viable product and get our first clients. My heart sank. I had nowhere near that kind of money. My savings account had about $175,000. It was everything I had managed to put away over 40 years of work. It was my retirement fund, my safety net. I believe in you, son, I said, but that is a lot of money. Aaron looked me in the eye. Dad, you have spent your entire life working for other people building their dreams. This is our chance to build something for ourselves, for our family. I would not ask if I was not 100% certain this will work. That night I could not sleep. I kept thinking about what Sarah would say. She had always believed Aaron was destined for greatness, and maybe this was my chance to be more than just the provider, to be a partner in something meaningful. The next morning I called the bank and arranged to transfer my entire life savings to a new business account. When that was not enough, I took out a second mortgage on the house. It was reckless, perhaps. But for the first time since losing Sarah, I felt alive with possibility. Aaron was stunned when I told him, Dad, I did not expect you to put in everything. If we are doing this, we are all in, I said. No half measures. We set up shop in my garage. Aaron bought computers and started coding, while I began reaching out to everyone I knew in the construction industry. My reputation opened doors that would have remained firmly shut to a 20-something with a business degree and no industry experience. Hal Jenkins at Midwestern Construction agreed to be our first client, not because he believed in the software, but because I had saved his company $30,000 on a difficult foundation project 15 years earlier. He owed me a favor, and now I was calling it in. Those early days were grueling. Aaron worked 18-hour days coding, while I divided my time between consulting on actual construction projects to keep money flowing and meeting potential clients for our software. We ate cheap takeout, drank too much coffee, and barely slept. The first version of the software was rough, but it worked. Hal's crew started using it, and within 2 months, he reported a 15% reduction in material waste. Word began to spread. Other contractors I had worked with over the decades called asking about this new system. We hit roadblocks, of course. The software crashed during an important demo with a major construction firm. We lost a key potential client to an established competitor. There were nights when I found Aaron asleep at his desk, exhausted and discouraged. Maybe I was wrong, he said during a particularly difficult week. Maybe this is too big for us. I put my hand on his shoulder the way I used to when he was a boy, afraid of thunderstorms. Nothing is too big for us, son. We are Franklins. We do not quit. 6 months in, we landed our first major contract with Delaney Construction, a regional company with projects in 3 states. That was the turning point. Aaron's software saved them over $200,000 in the first quarter alone. James Delaney became our biggest evangelist, recommending us to everyone in his considerable network. As we worked side by side, I saw a side of Aaron I had never fully appreciated before. His mind was brilliant at solving problems. When a contractor would mention an issue they faced, Aaron could immediately conceptualize a technological solution. Meanwhile, I understood the practical realities of construction sites, in a way Aaron never could from behind a computer screen. We were the perfect team. Father and son, experience and innovation, old school and new school. For the first time since losing Sarah, I felt like we were truly a family again. Not just related by blood, but bonded by shared purpose and mutual respect. Little did I know that this golden period would be as brief as it was bright. The transition from garage startup to legitimate business happened faster than I ever imagined possible. By our second year, we had outgrown my garage and rented a small office space in a business park. By year 3, we had 15 employees and were bursting at the seams again. Aaron handled the technological side of the business like a maestro conducting an orchestra. He hired talented young programmers who looked at him with the same admiration I saw in the eyes of apprentices watching master builders on construction sites. He spoke their language, understood their needs, and inspired loyalty through his own tireless work ethic. Meanwhile, I leveraged my 30-plus years of industry connections to bring in clients. Construction is a relationship business at its core. These were men I had worked alongside, whose children I had watched grow up, whose job sites I had helped save from disaster more times than I could count. They trusted me when I told them our software would revolutionize their operations. I became the face of Construct Edge to clients. I would visit job sites, hard hat on, work boots laced up, talking to foremen and workers about their daily challenges. Then I would relay those insights to Aaron and his team, who would incorporate solutions into the next software update. When we moved into our first real office building, a renovated warehouse with exposed brick and modern amenities, I insisted on designing the space to reflect both our construction roots and our technological future. The conference table was made from reclaimed lumber from a historic building I had helped renovate years earlier. The walls featured blueprints of iconic buildings alongside digital renderings of projects managed with our software. As Chief Operations Officer, I built a company culture based on the values that had guided my own career: hard work, integrity, loyalty. We hired people who understood that our clients were not just revenue streams, but partners in a shared mission to improve an industry that had been the backbone of American growth for generations. Our company grew rapidly, from 15 employees to 50, then to over 100, from one office to 3 across different states, from serving local contractors to partnering with some of the largest construction firms in the country. The breakthrough came in year 4 when we secured a contract with Blayton Industries, the third largest commercial construction company in the United States. Their implementation of our software across all their job sites nationwide put us on the map in a way nothing else could have. Suddenly, we were not just a promising startup, but a serious player in construction technology. Our annual revenue hit $1 million, then $5 million, and then $10 million by the end of our 5th year. We were featured in industry magazines and business publications. Aaron was named to a 30 under 30 list of promising young entrepreneurs. With success came changes. Aaron began spending more time in meetings with potential investors and less time with the development team. He traded his casual hoodies for tailored suits and started talking about exit strategies and venture capital rounds. I noticed the shift, but said nothing. This was always his dream, and I was proud to see him achieving it. If he was becoming more corporate, less the passionate coder who had worked beside me in the garage, that was a natural evolution. Or so I told myself. Then Aaron met Patricia during a business conference in San Francisco. She had an MBA from Harvard, a resume filled with tech startups, and a vision for Construct Edge that aligned with Aaron's growing ambitions. She began as a consultant, helping us optimize our organizational structure for maximum scalability. Patricia was brilliant, no question. She spoke with authority about markets and metrics that were foreign to me. She introduced Aaron to venture capitalists and angel investors who could provide the capital needed to expand nationally. She created sleek presentations showing hockey stick growth projections that made our board members lean forward in their chairs. But there was something cold about Patricia's approach to business. When I talked about our responsibility to clients who had taken a chance on us in the early days, she would smile tightly and talk about sentiment versus strategy. When I emphasized the importance of maintaining our company culture, as we grew, she would counter with data about productivity optimization. Aaron began to change under Patricia's influence. He became more distant, less interested in the day-to-day operations that had once been our shared passion. Increasingly, I would hear about major decisions after they had been made, usually with Patricia's fingerprints all over them. There were subtle comments that stung. "Dad, we need to think bigger," Aaron would say after I expressed concern about growing too quickly. Or, "The construction industry is changing. We need to change with it." When I questioned abandoning features our core clients relied upon in favor of flashier offerings that might attract new customers, I sensed the dynamic shifting, but pushed my concerns aside. After all, this company was as much Aaron's as it was mine. More so perhaps given that the software was his creation. If he and Patricia saw a path to greater success, who was I to stand in the way? Besides, I was busy with my own responsibilities. Our client base had grown to over 500 construction companies of various sizes. I spent most of my time traveling to job sites, troubleshooting implementation issues, and maintaining the personal relationships that kept those clients loyal to ConstructEdge despite growing competition in the space. When we hit the $10 million revenue mark, we had a company celebration. Aaron gave a speech thanking the team for their hard work. He acknowledged the programmers, the sales team, the customer support staff. He thanked Patricia for her strategic guidance. He mentioned me almost as an afterthought. And of course, thanks to my father for his early support. Early support. As if my ongoing 60-hour weeks maintaining client relationships were a footnote in the company history. As if the industry knowledge I brought to every product discussion was irrelevant. As if my life savings that funded our start and my decades of connections that brought in our first 50 clients were merely early support. I smiled and raised my glass along with everyone else. Family disagreements did not belong in public. Sarah had taught me that, and it was a principle I lived by. But that night, driving home alone to the house that still held Aaron's childhood photos on the walls, I felt the first real chill of what was coming. The beginning of the end came on a Tuesday morning in March. We had a scheduled board meeting to discuss the previous quarter's results, which had been exceptional. Our software was now being used by over 700 construction companies, including 6 of the top 20 nationwide. Revenue was up 30% year over year. I arrived early, as was my habit. I had stopped for donuts on the way, another tradition from our earliest days. Aaron used to joke that my maple bars were the secret fuel behind his coding marathons. The conference room was already occupied when I arrived. Aaron and Patricia were huddled at one end of the table with Howard Linfield, our company attorney. They fell silent when I walked in the universal sign that they had been discussing me. "Everything okay?" I asked, setting down the donut box. "Fine, Dad," Aaron said, but he did not meet my eyes. "We will get started once everyone arrives." The meeting began normally enough. Our CFO presented the quarterly results. Our head of sales discussed pipeline opportunities. I gave an update on client retention strategies that were yielding impressive results. Then Aaron cleared his throat and clicked to a slide titled, "Organizational Restructuring for Growth Phase." "As ConstructEdge enters its next chapter," he began, "we need to align our leadership structure with our strategic objectives. Based on extensive analysis and consultation with our advisors, We are implementing several changes effective immediately. He clicked through slides showing a new organizational chart. My position as COO was conspicuously absent. Reed Franklin will be transitioning from his operational role to a non-executive advisory position. Aaron continued as if he were discussing a stranger rather than his father. This will allow us to bring in leadership with specific expertise in scaling technology companies at our current growth stage. I sat there stunned into silence as Aaron introduced Patricia as the new Chief Operations Officer. The room was uncomfortably quiet. Board members glanced between Aaron and me, clearly aware of the awkwardness, but unwilling to intervene in what appeared to be a family matter. "Are there any questions?" Aaron concluded, his voice steady and professional. I had 1,000 questions, but I could not form a single one. The betrayal was too fresh, too overwhelming. I sat through the remainder of the meeting, in a fog barely registering the discussions about funding rounds and expansion plans. As people filed out, Howard Linfield, the attorney, asked me to join him in his office. Aaron and Patricia were already there when I arrived. "Reed," Howard began, "I have prepared the paperwork regarding your transition. The company is offering a severance package of 6 months' salary and continued health benefits during that period." Severance. I repeated the word, feeling foreign on my tongue. How could I be severed from something that was part of me, something I had built with my own hands and heart? "We are also asking you to sign a non-compete agreement," Howard continued, sliding papers across his desk. "Standard procedure for departing executives." "Departing?" I echoed. Another strange word. I had not decided to depart. I was being pushed out. "Dad," Aaron said, his voice softer now that the board members were gone, "this is the right move for the company. We need leadership with experience in high-growth tech environments." "And I do not have that experience," I said flatly. "Your contributions have been invaluable," Patricia interjected. "But Construct Edge is entering a phase where different skill sets are required. The investors we are courting expect a certain type of executive team." "The investors," I repeated. "And what about the clients, the relationships I have built over 5 years, over my entire career?" "Those relationships are with the company now," Patricia said smoothly. "We have account managers who can maintain them." I turned to Aaron, ignoring Patricia entirely. "Is this really what you want, to push your father out of the company we built together?" Aaron shifted uncomfortably. "It is not about want, Dad. It is about what Construct Edge needs to reach its full potential. You yourself always taught me to do what is necessary, not what is easy." "I taught you about loyalty," I said, my voice finally finding its strength. "I taught you about respecting the people who helped you get where you are." "This is business," Aaron replied, his tone hardening. "Not personal." Not personal. My son, whom I had raised alone after losing his mother, for whom I had sacrificed everything from my knees to my retirement, was firing me from our company and claiming it was not personal. "I need time to review these documents," I said, gathering the papers Howard had presented. "Of course," Howard replied. "Take the weekend, but we would like to announce the transition by Monday." I left without another word, walking past the cubicles filled with employees I had personally hired and mentored. Young men and women looked up from their computers, their expressions a mix of curiosity and discomfort. News traveled fast in an office. They knew something was happening, even if they did not know exactly what. Jason from customer support, whom I had hired straight out of college when no one else would take a chance on him, stood up as if to say something. But what could he say? What could anyone say? Cleaned out my office methodically, placing family photos and the few personal items I kept there into a cardboard box. The framed first dollar we had ever earned as a company. A hard hat signed by the crew of our first major client. The baseball Aaron and I had caught at the Tigers game the day we landed our first $1 million contract. As I carried the box to my truck, I passed the wall displaying our company values in bold letters: integrity, innovation, partnership. Words I had insisted on including, words that now seemed like cruel jokes. The drive home was a blur. I pulled into my driveway, carried my box inside, and set it on the kitchen table. Then I sat down and cried for the first time since Sarah's funeral. Not quiet tears, but gut-wrenching sobs that shook my entire body. I cried for the betrayal, yes. But more than that, I cried for the loss of the dream we had shared, for the death of the belief that my son valued me as more than a stepping stone to his ambitions, for the naive assumption that blood would prove thicker than the promise of venture capital. That night, I sat alone in my kitchen, surrounded by the ghosts of a family that no longer existed in the way I had believed. The house felt emptier than it had even in those first terrible months after Sarah died. Then at least I had Aaron to focus on, a reason to get up each morning. Now I was truly alone, discarded like an outdated tool, no longer useful to the project at hand. 63 years old, with no job, no purpose, and a son who had just made it painfully clear that sentiment had no place in his vision of success. For 2 weeks after my firing, I barely left the house. I ignored calls from concerned friends and former colleagues. I let the mail pile up unopened. I subsisted on coffee and whatever I could microwave without much effort. My entire identity had been wrapped up in my work, first as a builder, then as a father, and finally as a business leader. With all 3 roles stripped away, I felt hollow, aimless. I would wake up at 5 a.m. from habit, then remember I had nowhere to go, no one counting on me to solve problems or provide guidance. The severance papers remained unsigned on my kitchen table, a daily reminder of the betrayal. I could not bring myself to make it official, to legally sever my connection to the company that bore my blood and sweat in its foundation. The phone rang one morning, and for the first time in days, I answered without checking who was calling. It was Walter Simmons, one of our first major clients, and a man I had known for over 20 years. We had worked together on commercial projects long before Construct Edge existed. "Reed," he said when I answered. "Thank God. I have been trying to reach you for days." "Sorry, Walt," I replied, my voice rough from disuse. "I have been dealing with some personal matters." "I heard about what happened," Walter said bluntly. "That son of yours has made a serious mistake." I sighed. "It is his company, too. He has the right to make changes." "Bullshit," Walter replied with characteristic frankness. "That company exists because of you. Half my colleagues only signed on because they trust Reed Franklin, not some fancy software. Hell, most of us can barely use email." Despite everything, I chuckled at that. Walter was being modest. His company was one of the most technologically advanced in the industry. But his point struck home. The relationships I had cultivated over decades were the foundation upon which Construct Edge was built. "Listen," Walter continued. "I am in town for a Builders Association meeting. Let me buy you lunch." I almost refused out of habit, out of the desire to lick my wounds in private. But the thought of another day staring at my kitchen walls was suddenly unbearable. "All right," I agreed. "The usual place at 12:30. Walter and I met at Marino's, an old-school Italian restaurant, where construction deals in our city had been hammered out over pasta and red wine for generations. As I walked in, several industry veterans nodded in recognition. Word of my ouster had clearly spread. Walter was already at our usual corner table, a glass of scotch in front of him, despite the early hour. He stood and embraced me, a rare gesture from a man not given to physical demonstrations of emotion. You look like hell, Reed, he said as we sat down. Feel like it too, I admitted. After we ordered, Walter leaned forward. I am going to be straight with you because that is how we have always been with each other. There is a lot of talk in the industry about what happened at ConstructEdge. What kind of talk? I asked. Your boy and his fancy new executive team have been meeting with venture capital firms. Word is they are seeking $50 million in funding for national expansion. This was news to me, though not surprising, given the direction Aaron and Patricia had been heading. The problem, Walter continued, is that many of us are not happy with the changes already happening. The new account manager they assigned me did not know a joist from a girder. The latest software update removed features my team relies on daily. When I called to complain, I got some customer service rep reading from a script instead of someone who understands construction. He took a sip of his scotch. I am not the only one. James Delaney is furious about the price hike they announced last week. Tom Wilkins says the new interface is unusable for his field supervisors. What are you saying, Walt? I am saying that at least 15 major clients are considering other options when their contracts come up for renewal. Contracts that you personally negotiated with companies that signed on because of their relationship with you. The implications were staggering. Those 15 companies represented nearly 40% of ConstructEdge's current revenue. But that would hurt the company, I said. All those employees, their jobs. Walter shrugged. Business, is not that what your son said? We have our own employees to think about, our own projects to complete. We cannot use software that does not meet our needs just to help ConstructEdge's valuation. As we ate our pasta, Walter continued sharing industry gossip. The more he talked, the more I realized that Aaron and Patricia were alienating the very client base that had made the company successful in the first place. In their rush to appeal to investors, they were forgetting that our success had always been built on understanding the real-world needs of construction professionals. After lunch, I drove home with my mind racing. For the first time since the firing, I felt something other than despair. Not quite hope, not yet, but a spark of purpose. I went to my home office, a room I had barely entered since the firing, and unlocked the fireproof safe where I kept important documents. Inside was the original founding paperwork for ConstructEdge documents I had signed 5 years earlier when we first incorporated the business. I spent hours reading every page, every clause. Howard Linfield had drafted these papers, but I had insisted on certain provisions. I remembered the conversation clearly. I am putting my entire life savings into this, Howard. I need to protect myself. There on page 17 was the clause I half remembered. In the event of a leadership transition, key intellectual property rights required unanimous board approval to transfer. And I was still on the board, at least technically, until I signed the resignation papers. Even more importantly, on page 23, another provision stated that client relationships established through pre-existing contacts of the founders remained the property of those founders unless specifically transferred in writing. I had insisted on that clause because many of our initial clients were my personal contacts. Aaron had agreed readily at the time, seeing it as a formality. After all, why would I ever leave the company we were building together? I called Sandra Chen, an attorney I knew, through Walter. Unlike Howard Linfield, Sandra did not work for ConstructEdge. She specialized in business disputes and had a reputation for being both brilliant and tenacious. I need to understand my options, I told her when we met the next day. I explained the situation and showed her the founding documents. Sandra read through them methodically, occasionally making notes or asking clarifying questions. These provisions are quite strong, she said finally. Based on what you have shown me, you have significant leverage. The intellectual property clause alone could create major problems for them with potential investors. And the client relationships. Sandra nodded. Even stronger. If these relationships were based on your personal and professional history prior to the company's existence, you have a compelling case that they cannot be transferred without your consent. So what do? I asked. That depends on what you want, Sandra replied. Do you want money? Do you want revenge, or do you want something else entirely? It was a profound question, one that forced me to confront my own motivations. Did I want to punish Aaron for his betrayal? Did I want to watch ConstructEdge crumble without my steadying hand? Did I want to extract as much financial compensation as possible? None of those options sat right with me. ConstructEdge employed over 100 people now. Good people with families and mortgages. The company provided valuable services to an industry I had devoted my life to improving. And despite everything, Aaron was still my son, still the boy I had raised alone after losing Sarah. I want recognition, I said finally. I want respect for what I built. I want to protect the company culture and client relationships that made us successful in the first place. And yes, I want fair compensation for my contributions. But I do not want to destroy what we created. Sandra smiled. That is refreshingly reasonable. Most clients in your position would be out for blood. He is still my son, I said simply. Over the next week, Sandra and I developed a strategy. She helped me document every client relationship I had personally established, compiling evidence of my direct involvement in securing and maintaining those accounts. We reviewed patent applications related to processes I had helped develop based on my construction knowledge. We also gathered testimonials from key clients about why they had chosen ConstructEdge and the importance of my involvement in their decision. Walter was instrumental in this effort, connecting me with industry leaders who were happy to attest to my role in building the company. Throughout this process, I wrestled with conflicting emotions. The father in me wanted to protect Aaron, to shield him from the consequences of his actions. But the businessman in me, the man who had worked his entire life to build something meaningful, demanded justice. In the end, I decided on a middle path. I would not seek to destroy ConstructEdge or Aaron's career, but neither would I allow myself to be discarded without standing up for my worth and dignity. Once our strategy was in place, I called Aaron and requested a formal meeting to discuss my transition package. He sounded relieved, probably assuming I had finally accepted the inevitable and was ready to sign the severance papers. If only he knew what was coming. The meeting was scheduled for 9 a.m. on a Monday in the main conference room at ConstructEdge headquarters. I arrived 15 minutes early, dressed in my best suit, with Sandra Chen beside me carrying a leather portfolio containing our carefully prepared documents. Aaron was already there along with Patricia and Howard Linfield. Two other men in expensive suits sat at the far end of the table. Investors, I guessed, or representatives of the venture capital firm Aaron was courting. "Dad," Aaron said, standing as I entered. His smile was polite but distant. "Thank you for coming in. I believe you know everyone except for Michael Drayson and James Porter from Ascension Partners." I shook hands with everyone, introducing Sandra as my attorney. I caught the slight widening of Aaron's eyes, the first indication that this meeting might not go as he had planned. "Shall we get started?" Howard suggested, opening a folder. "We have the severance agreement ready for signature, along with the non-compete and non-disclosure forms we discussed." "Actually," I said calmly, "I have some concerns I would like to address before we proceed with any signatures." Patricia shifted impatiently. "Mr. Franklin, we have been more than generous with the severance package. 6 months of salary is well above industry standard." I ignored her, focusing on Aaron. "Son, before we go any further, I want to ask you one question. Do you remember who our first client was?" Aaron blinked, caught off guard by the non sequitur. "Midwestern Construction," he answered. Hal Jenkins signed on when we were still working from the garage. And why did Hal Jenkins take a chance on unproven software from a brand new company with no track record? Aaron hesitated. Because you knew him. You had worked with him before. I saved his company $30,000 on a foundation issue 15 years earlier, I clarified. He owed me a favor and I called it in. For you, for us. I turned to the investors. Gentlemen, are you aware that approximately 70% of ConstructEdge's current client base came from my personal and professional relationships in the construction industry? The men exchanged glances. Clearly, they had not been given this information. Sandra, I said, would you please distribute the materials we prepared? Sandra handed folders to everyone at the table. Inside was a meticulously documented list of clients I had personally brought to ConstructEdge, along with statements from many of them regarding their reasons for choosing our company. You will notice, I continued as they reviewed the documents, that many of these clients specifically cite their relationship with me as the primary factor in their decision to work with ConstructEdge. Howard Linfield was the first to grasp the implications. He quickly flipped to our founding documents, scanning for the clause I knew he would find. The client relationship provision, he murmured, then looked up at Aaron with concern. What is he talking about? Patricia demanded. Howard cleared his throat. There is a clause in the original incorporation documents stating that client relationships established through pre-existing contacts of the founders remain the property of those founders unless specifically transferred in writing. That is ridiculous, Patricia scoffed. Those are company clients. Actually, Sandra interjected, under the terms of your own corporate bylaws, that is not automatically the case, and Mr. Franklin has never signed any document transferring those relationships to the company. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Aaron was staring at the documents, his face pale. There is more, I said, turning to the next section of the folder. You will also see documentation regarding several key patents and proprietary processes that I developed based on my construction expertise. The intellectual property provision, Howard said, now visibly concerned. Unanimous board approval for transfer in the event of leadership transition. This is absurd, Patricia snapped. You cannot hold the company hostage over legal technicalities. They are not technicalities, Sandra replied coolly. They are binding legal agreements that your company is currently in danger of violating. One of the investors, Michael Drayson, closed his folder with deliberate care. Perhaps we should reschedule our discussion about funding until these matters are resolved. The panic on Patricia's face was almost worth the weeks of humiliation I had endured. Almost. That will not be necessary, I said. I have no intention of harming ConstructEdge. This company represents the work of many dedicated people, including my son. I simply want what is fair. And what exactly do you consider fair? Aaron asked, finally finding his voice. I slid my own document across the table. My terms are straightforward. First, I want to be reinstated as chairman emeritus with a permanent board seat. I will not be involved in day-to-day operations, but I will have oversight on major decisions affecting client relationships and company culture. Aaron looked skeptical but did not interrupt. Second, I want fair equity compensation reflecting my founding role and ongoing value to the company. The current offer of 6 months' salary is frankly insulting given what I have contributed. And third, Aaron asked, correctly sensing there was more. Third, I want a public acknowledgement of my role in building this company. Not for my ego, but because our clients and employees deserve to know that ConstructEdge still values the principles it was founded on. Integrity, relationships, quality. The room was silent as everyone processed my demands. They were firm but reasonable. I was not asking to be restored as COO or demanding that Patricia be removed. I was not seeking to block the investment deal or extract an exorbitant payout. Patricia started to speak, but Aaron raised his hand to silence her. For the first time, I saw a flash of the son I had raised, not the corporate executive he had become. "We need to discuss this privately," Aaron said. "Can you give us the room for 30 minutes? Sandra and I stepped out into the hallway. As the door closed behind us, I heard Patricia's angry voice rising, followed by the calmer tones of the investors. "You did well in there," Sandra told me. "You were firm but reasonable. That is a powerful combination." We waited in a small meeting room down the hall, saying little. Sandra reviewed some notes while I stared out the window at the city skyline. Somewhere in those buildings were construction projects being managed, with our software buildings rising because of tools Aaron and I had created together. After exactly 30 minutes, Howard Linfield came to fetch us. His expression gave nothing away as he escorted us back to the conference room. Aaron stood as we entered. Patricia remained seated, her face a mask of controlled fury. The investors watched with keen interest. "I have discussed your proposal with our team and our potential investors," Aaron said formally. "We recognize the validity of your claims and the significant contribution you have made to Construct Edge's success." I waited, saying nothing. "We are prepared to accept your terms with some modifications," Aaron continued. "You will be instated as Chairman Emeritus with a board seat. Your equity stake will be adjusted to 15% of the company with appropriate voting rights. And we will issue a joint statement acknowledging your founding role and ongoing value to Construct Edge." 15% was more than I had expected. At the company's current valuation, it represented millions of dollars. "There is one additional condition," Aaron added. "We need you to actively support the transition with key clients. Some of them have expressed concern about recent changes, and your endorsement would be valuable." So they had already been getting pushback from clients. That explained their relatively quick capitulation. "I will always support what is best for our clients," I said carefully. "If the changes truly improve their experience and outcomes, I will endorse them wholeheartedly. If not, I will expect to be heard when I raise concerns." Aaron nodded, recognizing the subtle boundary I was establishing. I would not be a rubber stamp or a figurehead trotted out to placate nervous clients. I would be a genuine advocate for their needs. "We will have the revised agreements drawn up by tomorrow," Howard said. "If everything is acceptable, we can finalize this by the end of the week." "That will be fine," I agreed, standing to signal the end of the meeting. As everyone filed out, Aaron hesitated, then asked if I would stay behind for a moment. Once we were alone, his corporate facade cracked slightly. "Was this really necessary, Dad? The legal maneuvers, the attorneys? We could have worked something out." "Could we?" I asked quietly. "You fired me from our company without warning. You offered me a severance package that did not begin to reflect my contributions. You called it just business when it was anything but." Aaron had the grace to look ashamed. I let myself get caught up in Patricia's vision for the company. The investors she brought in, the valuation she promised. It was intoxicating. "Success often is," I acknowledged. "But true success, lasting success, is not built on discarding the people and principles that got you started. It is built on honoring them, building upon them." "I am sorry," Aaron said, and for the first time since this began, I believed him. "I handled this all wrong." "Yes, you did." I agreed, not willing to let him off the hook too easily. "But it is not too late to get it right. Not just with me, but with the clients and employees who believed in our vision." Aaron nodded slowly. "The company needs you. I see that now." "And I need the company," I admitted. These past weeks without purpose have been some of the hardest of my life. We did not hug or have a dramatic reconciliation. The wound was still too fresh for that. But as I walked out of Construct Edge headquarters that day, I felt something I had not felt since the day of my firing: hope. Not just hope for my own future, but hope for the company we had built together and hope for my relationship with my son. We had a long way to go to rebuild trust, but we had taken the first step on that journey. As I drove home, I thought about calling Walter to share the news. But first, I needed a moment to process everything that had happened. I pulled over at a scenic overlook above the city and sat watching the sunset paint the skyline in gold and crimson. Somewhere in that tableau of buildings and streets was the future Aaron and I would build, different from what either of us had imagined, but perhaps stronger for having been tested by fire. The weeks following our agreement brought significant changes to Construct Edge. True to their word, Aaron and the board formally appointed me Chairman Emeritus with a 15% equity stake. The company issued a press release highlighting my founding role and ongoing contribution to the company's vision and client relationships. My first official act was to request a comprehensive review of recent product changes that had prompted client complaints. I insisted on joining Aaron and Patricia in meetings with our largest clients to hear their concerns firsthand. What we discovered confirmed my suspicions. In their rush to attract venture capital, Aaron and Patricia had prioritized flashy features that impressed investors over core functionality that served clients' actual needs. They had replaced experienced account managers who understood construction with polished sales professionals who spoke the language of tech, but not the language of job sites. Patricia resisted my recommendations, at first seeing them as a challenge to her authority and vision. But when Walter Simmons and 3 other major clients threatened to cancel their contracts during a particularly tense meeting, she began to understand that my concerns were not merely the grumblings of a displaced founder. "Your father was right," I overheard one investor telling Aaron after that meeting. "The company's value is in these relationships. If you lose them, all the innovative technology in the world will not save you." Slowly, painfully, we began to rebalance our priorities. We restored key features that had been removed from the software. We created a client advisory board to provide input on future updates. We hired several experienced construction professionals to work alongside the tech team, ensuring that innovation served real-world needs rather than merely impressing venture capitalists. As for Patricia, she eventually recognized that her vision for Construct Edge needed to incorporate, not replace, the foundation I had built. While we never became friends, we developed a grudging professional respect. She was brilliant at scaling technology and attracting investment. I was unmatched at understanding client needs and maintaining industry relationships. Together, albeit uneasily, we made a formidable team. Aaron occupied the space between us, learning from both. From Patricia, he gained sophistication about capital markets and technology trends. From me, he relearned the values that had made Construct Edge successful in the first place: integrity, relationships, and a deep understanding of the industry we served. Our personal relationship healed more slowly. For months, our interactions remained formal, confined to board meetings and client visits. The easy camaraderie we had shared in the garage startup days seemed like a distant memory. The first real breakthrough came 6 months after our agreement. Aaron called me on a Saturday, something he had not done since before the firing. "Dad," he said, his voice hesitant, "I am looking at the Ferguson project proposal. Something about the foundation specifications seems off. Could you take a look?" It was a small gesture, but significant. He was acknowledging my expertise, seeking my input, not because our agreement required it, but because he valued my judgment. I spent that afternoon at his home office reviewing the plans. We ordered pizza, drank beer, and worked side by side like we used to. We did not discuss the past or our feelings. We just worked together on a problem, finding our way back to each other through the familiar terrain of construction challenges and solutions. As the months passed, these informal consultations became more frequent. Sometimes I would stop by his office with coffee and donuts, my silent peace offering. Other times he would call with a question that could easily have been answered by someone else, his way of reaching out. Patricia eventually left Construct Edge for a CEO position at another tech startup. Her departure might have created a leadership vacuum, but instead, it allowed Aaron to step fully into his role as CEO, blending her ambitious vision with my grounded approach. The company continued to grow, but with a more balanced strategy. We expanded nationally secured significant investment and developed new technologies. But we never again lost sight of the clients and employees who had been with us from the beginning. I found unexpected fulfillment in my new role. Freed from day-to-day operational responsibilities, I focused on mentoring young employees, particularly those from backgrounds similar to mine. I started a foundation in Sarah's name to provide scholarships for children of construction workers who wanted to pursue higher education. One evening, about a year after our agreement, Aaron invited me to dinner at his home. It was an unusually formal invitation, and I arrived curious and slightly apprehensive. He had cooked meatloaf, my recipe, the one I had perfected during his childhood. We ate at his dining table, making small talk about business and sports, avoiding deeper topics, as had become our habit. After dinner over scotch, Aaron finally broached the subject that had been hanging between us. "I need to apologize properly," he said, his voice thick with emotion. Not in a conference room with lawyers present. Not as CEO to chairman. As a son to his father. I set down my glass, giving him my full attention. "What I did was unforgivable," Aaron continued. "I convinced myself it was about business, about what the company needed. But the truth is, I got caught up in my own ambition and ego. I forgot who helped me get there, who sacrificed everything for me." "Not everything," I said quietly. "I still had you. Until I threw that away too." Aaron's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "I keep thinking about what Mom would say if she could see what I did." The mention of Sarah, rare in our conversations, hit me hard. "She would be disappointed," I acknowledged. "But she would also believe in second chances. She always did." "Do you," Aaron asked, vulnerability naked in his voice, "believe in second chances for me?" I thought about the question carefully. Forgiveness was not a single act, but a process, one I was still working through. The betrayal had cut deep, leaving scars that might never fully heal. Yet sitting across from my son, seeing the genuine remorse in his eyes, I knew my answer. "I believe in you," I said simply. "I always have, even when it hurt to." Aaron nodded, tears finally spilling. We did not embrace or make grand declarations. We were not that kind of father and son. But something shifted between us that night, a step toward healing that felt more substantial than all the legal agreements and professional accommodations we had made. As the company continued to thrive under our complementary leadership, I often reflected on the lessons of our journey. I had learned that standing up for your worth does not mean destroying what you helped build. Aaron had learned that true success comes not from discarding the past, but from honoring it while moving forward. Together we had learned that family businesses are complex ecosystems, where blood and commerce intermingle in ways that can either strengthen or poison both. Finding the right balance required constant attention and care, like tending a garden that can either flourish or wither depending on how it is nurtured. When I speak to young entrepreneurs now, I tell them that business success without personal integrity is a hollow achievement. I tell them that the relationships they build are as important as the products they create. And I tell them that sometimes the hardest person to stand up to is the one you love the most, but also the most necessary. Have you ever had to stand up to someone you loved to protect your dignity? Let me know in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more stories of struggle, redemption, and the complicated dance of family and business. Share this with someone who might need to hear that standing up for themselves does not mean burning everything to the ground. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, the measure of your success is not just what you build, but how you build it and who you bring along the journey.